Hello, and welcome to the Practice Marketing Podcast, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics and experts so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today we're going to talk about how to build your practice to sell at maximum value and what buyers are really looking for. So great to have Amit Gaglani here with us from AG Management Consulting here. And Amit actually is a PT and had a practice that he built up over 18 years called Arrow Physical Therapy in New Jersey. And he grew his revenue to 7 digits and more by scaling his operations. And he just had a really amazing run practice, won lots of accolades and awards for Outstanding Business of the Year, physical therapy practices. And he built it up, and then he went through the whole process of selling that. And now he works as a consultant between private equity groups and PT clinics. And so whether you're a PT or a chiro or other medical facility, you can really learn a lot from Amit here and what he does in this world. So great to have you here, Amit, and looking forward to learning about this whole world of sales and acquisitions and private equity.
Absolutely. Plus, you being in the marketing world, that plays a huge part in the growth cycles and stuff. So yes, this should be fun.
Definitely. So, I've been through a sale too, right? So it's definitely one of those it very it takes a lot of work, right? It takes a lot of work to get through that process there. And if you're a practice owner, this is really the end game at some point, right? Whether it's soon, whether it's really far down the road, but like eventually you got to get out of your business somehow, right? You got to transition on whether it's to something bigger, to something different, or to just retire, right? And so as we start to look at the model of how do we exit our business at some point, like we want to sell it for maximum value, right? We put all this
Yeah.
effort and sweat equity into our business. We want to, reap the rewards of it at some point of the day. And so, from your end, as you've worked not only selling your practice, but also helping others in this whole sales process, like what are the three things that buyers, are typically looking for when they're trying to acquire a practice?
Well, the big thing that they're looking for is love. That's what they're really looking for. I know you didn't expect that answer, but when I say love, it's like dating. Honestly, they're getting to know you, you're getting to know them. They're looking at your practice to see how does it fit into their model? And the truth of the matter is it depends on who the actual buyer is. It's like, physical therapist in practice, and when you're doing marketing, you're creating an avatar. Who's the ideal candidate that you're trying to get in? Same thing in this scenario. When you're selling, who are you selling to? What your strategy is for a strategic, which is a large physical therapy company already, that strategy is going to be different than what your strategy is for a private equity company. And then there's some private equity companies that don't have a physical therapy vertical or a healthcare vertical, and they really want to get in. So your strategy for that is a little bit different. So if I had to boil it down to one answer, they're all looking kind of like for the EBITDA multiple, right? They're looking to see how strong your EBITDA is. Now, there's layers after that, and it depends on your geographic region. It depends on your niches that you guys offer. It depends on, where's the platform practice located. So we can go definitely a lot deeper into that answer. But they
Yeah,
want to
and
see that you're making money and
they
lots
want
of
to
money.
see,
That's
yeah,
what
the
they
money
want.
at the end of the day, right? Yeah, but like how easy is it to walk into the shoes, right? And so,
Yes.
a buyer doesn't want to go into something that's going to be a lot of work to turn this thing around, right?
Yeah.
They're really looking, can I step in here easily? Is it going to continue to make the money that it's making? And it makes it an easier buy, an easier transition for them. So I, I totally hear you on that. And at the end of the day, we're looking at that EBITDA, right? We're looking at the money that can be made out of it. But like you said, there's layers to that process. Um, so as you were talking a little bit about here some of the different types of buyers, and
Yeah.
you have to like position yourself a little differently to that. What do you see in the marketplace today? Like, is it primarily private equity? Is it like a little bit larger clinics buying out smaller clinics? Like what do you typically see there?
Yeah, definitely the larger clinics buying out the smaller ones and trying to consolidate their cost centers. Basically, you have one billing department that runs all the physical therapy centers as opposed to multiple billing departments, which is what we see in privately owned practices. And then
Mhm.
they're buying their equipment from one provider and getting the maximum amount of discount that they can. So they're just trying to consolidate all these costs to try to run things and operations smoothly. And as we kind of talked about earlier, and you had mentioned, the private equity world. So I try to attend these healthcare private equity conferences, and the best, I shouldn't say the best, but the largest physical therapy practices in the country will attend, the CEOs and everything. So you kind of see the game that they play, and what I mean by game, I mean a game in the sense like how they're trying to consolidate costs, increase reimbursement by negotiating in a certain way, and so that way they can maximize their profit margins.
Mhm. Yeah, really interesting. It's a whole nother level, right? And I find it very fascinating with that. And so, but as the as the individual here, as you're looking to sell your own
Yeah,
practice at some point, right? Um, what are some of the 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 process there, or the things that
yeah.
the practice owner is going to have to really look at, right, to make sure that they can get that best value?
So really, I think the practice owner has to really decide what they want at the end. Are they looking to still stay on and still be an employee there? There's a strategy that they have to employ. Are they looking to just be a clinician? They don't want to have any headaches. They just want to go to work, punch in the clock, and then punch out. And the administration, the billing, and that's on somebody else. There's a different there's a whole different plan for that. To be honest, the physical therapy companies would rather somebody step down and just be a PT in their place. They love it when a former owner is now a producer and is just making money inside the practice for them, as opposed to wanting to sell out. When they want to sell out 100%, the value of your business goes down
Mm,
because they know that you built the practice. They know that you've had something to do with the marketing, something to do with just you're ingrained into that practice. And for you to step out right away, they know they're going to take a hit. So if they know they're going to take a hit ahead of time, their valuation of your practice is going to go down a little bit too.
yeah, that's
Whereas if
interesting
you're
because
staying on, if you're signing an agreement that you're staying on, they're going to give you more value.
yeah. So that might be something as think to the future, right? In their long
Yeah.
term. Maybe you're going to sell your practice in 5 years. Maybe you're going to sell it in 10 years. But it sounds to me like you want to kind of put into your own plan almost like a step down
Yeah.
uh, transition, right? Instead of just like, hey, I'm just going to sell and I'm out. That like you said, you might even get better multiples, or you might get a better outcome and more buyers if you're in that step down process where you're willing to
Correct.
work for another couple years within the company, right?
There's a caveat though. If you can put together a very strong management team and show that you could take a vacation for a month and your numbers are not going to get hit, and you can
Mhm.
show that, then that brings your value back up because now they know the business is not dependent on you, that you've built a team that is doing and firing in all pistons. And because of that, the practice still hums along. Now, there
Yeah.
you could still get a great value.
Would you say that's one of the biggest detractors from the selling your business for maximum value is that ownership involvement?
Yeah, a majority of the practices, even when we bought them, they were mom and pop owners. They were basically mom and pop owners that just got tired of dealing with the administration, just felt beat up from the insurance companies, landlords increasing their rent, but they couldn't get higher reimbursement, and they just every year the cost of doing business would go up, but the cost of the reimbursement coming in wasn't. So they got to a point where they got fed up, and then that's when they wanted out. But unfortunately, that's when you're at your weakest, right?
Yeah.
It's when you want it, that's when people see that you want it and need it, and that's when you're not going to get the value.
Yeah. And I've seen that happen time and time again where people, they it's unfortunate because they haven't really mastered the business side of running a
Yeah,
practice, right? They're great clinicians, but they haven't mastered the business or the marketing side of running the business. And so, like you said, the costs keep going up, but the reimbursement doesn't, or they don't know how manage some of the costs to make it keep the profitability where it needs to be. And then they're like, okay, I give up, right? And if you're at that point where you kind of give up on that, like you said, you're at your weakest. You're gonna get
yeah,
if you're gonna get bought out, you're gonna get bought out for the least amount. But that if you re-educate yourself and you start to focus on these things and you can make your business run better, then your value of your business goes up, and that could be hundreds of thousands, it could be millions of dollars, right? That you could be leaving on the table if you walk away, right? If you walk
For
away.
every dollar that you save, it increases your multiple by that. So depending on where your EBITDA is, you can be as low as a 3 multiple, or you could be as high as like a 12 multiple, depending on how well you've built your company. So for every dollar that you're actually not spending and it goes into the profit, that multiply that by that multiple number. So you just multiply it times 3 if you're a small practice. If you're a large practice, you just multiply it by 10 or 12. That's
Wow.
huge. So you save $10,000. If you save $10,000 in your expenses and you're at a, let's say, 10 multiple, you just multiplied it times 10. So
Mhm.
that actually that cost savings and that comes out to a lot of money.
That
So
is a
the
lot of
better
money.
that they get, yeah, the better that they get at their business and they
Mhm.
streamline their costs, they can see that in the valuation then.
Yeah. So as you've navigated through this and looked at other businesses, what would you say is like a red flag for like an unbuyable practice from a buyer's perspective?
If there's fraudulent things being done, fraudulent things with Medicare, nobody wants to touch anything that's federal. It's like cheating with the IRS. Nobody wants to deal with anything like that. It just becomes too much of a headache for anybody to want to deal with. You
Hmm.
know, sometimes there's small things like, hey, because small practices don't have all the systems put in place. So, for example, if you're a practice and you do bank runs every week to deposit it, and somebody's not great about keeping the deposit slips and they're trying to line up the dollar that came in and things don't line up perfectly, don't worry, that's not a huge deal. There's always things that we can look into the practice to mitigate those types of things. And we know going forward that we're going to change it so it's going to be fine. But when there's fraudulent things being done, it's being tried to be like covered up and we uncover it when we're doing the due diligence process. That's just, we want to step away. Or if
Yeah.
the owner is not being truthful about certain things and trying to hide certain things, or they say that they're really involved when they're really not involved at all, and
Mhm.
it shows, and the team is not happy, or like, what, this is just, nobody wants to buy a problem. That's what it comes to it.
Right. Yeah. So moral of the story is run a squeaky clean ship, right?
Yes, run a squeaky clean ship. Be out there to do good, and honestly everything just falls into place. If you're out there to do good, mostly everything just falls in place.
Now you mentioned systems, right? So when it comes to valuations and the value of your business, how important is it to have systems in your practice?
Well, I think systems help us to monetize the practice a little bit better, have higher profit margins, and allow us to have more than just one office. Like you said, I consult for private practices right now, and the number of people who think that their business is doing great and they only have one office, it's because they only have one office. When the business owner is there all the time, everything goes well, and they think that, oh, I'll just open up another office and it's going to do the same exact thing, but they're not there, and they notice, wait, why is that one not doing so great and this one's doing good? It's because they're not there. So if they don't build the right systems in place that they can monitor the practice without having to be there, like you
Mhm.
and I know, to manage it by statistics, right? The statistical trend will tell you if something is wrong. Don't Won't tell you the exact answer, but it'll tell you something's wrong in this area and I need to investigate and I need to kind of pick that out to see what's going on, right?
Yeah.
If they're not trained in that, they just think, oh, I have one office that does good. I'm just going to open up another one and another one, just do the same thing.
Mhm.
That's where their lack of training, gets to them. We're
Yeah.
trained to be physical therapists, right? We're not trained to be a physical therapy owner. And what I did, like I was asking my friends, well, how do you do this and how do you do that? They're giving me their opinions, right? They're not giving me facts, they're giving me opinions. And I did that for a while, and then I realized, what does he know? He doesn't know anything. He didn't get any education in this thing. I'm like, why am I following him? I'm not going to get anywhere if I follow him. Same thing here. If they don't get educated on being a business owner, then they're just always going to be staying a mom and pop person. And not that there's anything wrong with that. You could love to treat, but you should love to treat, and that's why you're treating, as opposed to I have to treat because my expenses are so high, and I'm basically working hard to employ everybody else.
Yeah.
That's not the goal.
Yeah. And I wonder then if if a good test is before you open that second location or third location, can you work from home a few days a week, right? Two
Yeah.
or 3 days a week, and it doesn't impact anything in the business.
I've heard that. I've actually heard that same thing. Like, can you go away on a month's vacation and come back and your practice is actually increasing in business? Then you know you actually have a business and you don't have a job. You have a
Mhm.
job if everything is required for you to do. You have a business if you could step away and the business still goes up.
Yeah, that's great. And so, we talk about systems here. Obviously, that builds more value into your practice, right? It's something that, would you say that it's something that buyers are looking for too? Like if that business, they can prove that they have these different systems, and obviously, if you have good systems in place, then the business should run much better than if it didn't.
They do and they don't. They value it based on the EBITDA and they'll give you a multiple. And then there's some nuances that get massaged around that, right? If they notice that you have good systems in place, they think, okay, well, this is going to be an easy, in their mind, this is going to be an easy practice for us just to acquire and then just, fold it into us. They're going to have their own systems that we would have to get used to, you know, but at the end of the day, they just think to themselves, this is a well-run practice. It just makes it easier to acquire, as opposed to another practice that has no systems. They're like, this is going to be tougher because we got to get everybody on board to do this, this, and this, and they're not used to this. And most of the time, what happens is the new buyer comes in, says, I want to do this, this, and this, and then there's everybody's like, I don't want to do this, or they just kind of everybody fights back. So you got a revolt, right? But if you have a practice that's already using systems and you're just tweaking those a little bit,
Right.
then it's a lot easier for the new buyer.
Yeah, definitely. And so, one of those key systems has got to be marketing, right? So, how have you seen marketing help build a value in the business?
So before I sold my practice, in my square, literally not even 1 mile radius, there was at least 6 other practices. So it became very imperative that we have to differentiate what we do, right? We have to show, not only do we have to show that we're getting great results, but we have to let everybody know that, it's not good enough just to deliver good results and hope that, hey, build it and they will come. That philosophy in business does not exist, as you know. No, build it and nobody will come. Even if you do good work, in order for that to get out there, you have to be able to push that message out there. So you have to do some public relations efforts. You have to do some marketing efforts. That's either reactivating your old patients, but you have to have systems for that too. And it's not a matter of just, hey, let me try this, let me try that. Let me put a methodical plan in place to do that. I worked with practice promotions and we were doing newsletters. We wanted to highlight, some of our own staff, some of, the things that we're doing. We had like success stories and testimonials of our patient successes that we had. So we're highlighting the fact, hey, look, we do good work. Here it is. It's not us saying it. It's the patient actually saying it. We would let the physicians in the community know we're doing good work and here's a patient testimonial. Patient hand wrote this. It's not just us marketing around and going and promoting our company.
Mhm.
So marketing itself has a huge piece to do to it, and that's just the physical part. Then there's the digital part, as you know, the SEO stuff. And sometimes at that time it was big for us to get highly ranked on Google. So we would do efforts to make sure our ranking on Google would go up and try to do organic stuff to get our practice up there. So, the growth of new patient was definitely purposeful, and that was a lot of promotions and marketing being put into place.
Yeah, yeah, definitely good points there. And what I see too is like as a buyer comes in and looks at your practice, right? They are looking at, okay, how you get new patients, you get this many new patients. Are the new patients up? Are they down? Are they up? Are they up? Is it like roller coastering? Is there no predictability here? Like that lessens the value, right? Do they what kind of online presence do you have? I mean, they're going to check that out for you. Like, are
Yep.
you pretty active in Google? Are you up at the top of Google? Are you active in social media? Like, these are things that just go into that like
Yeah.
confidence feeling from the buyer, right? So if you haven't got a really dialed in marketing
Yeah.
system, obviously that's going to impact overall new patients and revenue into the business, but it does impact the confidence of the buyer that this will continue to go on in the
Correct.
future if you were not there. Because if you get people come back because they like the owner and that owner leaves, then new patients are a
So
problem.
you just said a huge thing. So for a buyer, the buyer is going to look at, okay, well, this is what you've been doing in business. Everything looks good, and you're getting this many new patients on average. So how do you get these new patients? And what they're looking for, honestly, is it because you have a relationship with the physicians?
Mhm.
because that's a loose end for them. If it's because of your personal relationship with the physicians and you decide now you're selling and the physicians are like, oh, he sold his practice, and they start referring elsewhere, their investment now changes significantly. So they have to make sure that, okay, these as many referrals are coming, but it's not based just because of your relationship. Of
Mhm.
course, the relationship doesn't hurt, but it can't be solely based on that. Like, you have systems in place that are reactivating old patients. You have systems in place that are, or people in place that might be marketing your practice and going out there and getting, the physicians to actually refer to your practice over another practice. So now that relationship is not just based on you. And that's what they'd like to see, because
Yeah.
once you get paid, they know the dynamics change a little bit. So they kind of have to ensure the fact that, hey, the system continues and your business continues to flourish.
Do you want more freedom in your clinic? Then you need to work on your business, not just in it. The top practice owners know that they need a marketing system that consistently attracts patients from the internet. And at Practice Promotions, we've helped hundreds of practice owners skyrocket to the top of Google and get more new patients from online. Go to practicepromotions.net/kit to get our free practice marketing sample kit. It includes all our digital marketing tips and tricks that will get you new patients from Google. That's practicepromotions.net/kit, KIT, for a free marketing kit. And now back to the show.
Yeah. One thing I've seen too for practices is they're trying to grow. The owner still tries to do or handle a lot of the marketing organization, and they don't really have a full-time marketing director in place yet. And that again, like when it comes down to the effectiveness of trying to get new patients in, that kind of holds you back, right? You need to have someone in the business that's driving new patients in all the time
Yeah.
and organizing things to make that happen. And it shouldn't be the owner, right?
Yeah. General rule of thumb is you don't want 20%, you don't want over 20% of your business coming from one referral source, because then you're not diversified. If you
Yeah.
got too many patients coming from one referral source and that physician, let's say, decides to move, then it's a tremendous impact. So if you're getting a lot of patients from one physician, that's great. Don't stop it, but start diversifying. Start making sure the other ones start sending too.
Yeah, absolutely. I've certainly had those number of conversations where they're like, we don't need to market too much because we're pretty busy. And then you find out like 80% of their business is
Yeah.
from physician referrals and probably like two or three main docs, right?
Yeah.
So if those docs were acquired by a hospital group and you didn't know about
Yes.
it.
Happens all the time too.
Yeah.
People think it's not going to happen to them. When I was in private practice, there was a physician that loved us and he decided to move to Alaska, of all places, from New Jersey. We weren't getting any more referrals. Thankfully, it didn't impact us that much because we had referrals come from other places. But the places that he did support a lot, oh boy, they were like, oh, what are we going to do? And the
Yeah.
last thing in this market, the last thing you want to do in this market is let go of a therapist. Therapists are so hard to get. You don't want to be letting go of them.
Yeah. I'm curious, from let's say like private equity groups and larger like strategic PT groups. Are they actively looking at high performing clinics or clinics that are noticed in certain areas? Or do they
Oh
wait
yeah.
for people to reach out to them?
No, no, no. They're actively looking to acquire. They have people on their end that are M&A that are literally approaching people saying because they have demographics of where they already have practices and they just want to fold, they want to do tuck-ins, right?
Mhm.
Or if they're not in as very specific, if they're not in a state, they want a platform practice. And the platform practice that they want is one that has all the systems kind of built in. They don't want a problem. They want to get a practice in the state that has, okay, multiple offices, they have systems in place, they have a management team, and they know that, hey, if we acquire them, and that's going to be the platform practice, and now we can acquire other pop-ups or other facilities around that area, and those will just go under the main facility that we just bought.
Mm.
So they're looking at that all the time. They're like, we want to strategically buy this one because it's strong, and then we'll just buy other ones that are smaller around it.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's something that we see at practice promotions. It's unfortunate for us because a lot of times we lose the client because they got acquired, but because the client is growing and doing very well because their marketing's
They get
dialed in, they get sought after, right? And so, yeah, I think it's something to know. Like, when you again, it comes back to like, what are you doing in the business? If you're building the business, if you're systematizing the business, its business is going to do better. It's going to get more well known, right? It's going to get you can become more attractive, right? And like
yeah.
you said, that people that are actively looking and opportunities start to come your way from lots of different groups like this, which is very interesting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, here's it, going through these different buying and selling processes, is there anything that surprised you as you've gone through these?
Surprised me. I mean, there's things when you're looking at some due diligence on some people, being a physical therapist, an owner that started my practice, that did everything, literally everything in the practice, you just know how everything kind of runs. So when you're doing your due diligence, you're kind of digging in. You're like, wait a second, something's off over here. Your average reimbursement over here doesn't look so right. Let me look at some EOBs. Wait a second, something's off here. Were you in network? Were you out of network? You kind of pick up on these nuances, and then you get to learn that sometimes you're not just kicking tires, you're doing it with a knowledge base. Okay. There's companies out there that literally do due diligence, but they're not rooted in physical therapy, so they don't know a lot of times what exactly to look for.
Hmm.
Whereas a physical therapist or somebody who has in that profession knows. They know to look underneath the covers in sometimes. So yes, I've been surprised when I saw that they claimed an average reimbursement of X number, but I know in that state, because I was the national director of payer relations, so I used to negotiate insurance contracts on behalf of my private equity for like 15 states. So I have an idea of what people are paying, right? So when I see that average is a little bit higher than usual, I'm like, something's a little off. We need to dig in a little bit deeper over here, or
Yeah.
or also trying to make sure that the not the buyer, but the practice that we're purchasing and the owner there, everything lines up perfectly. That they're in not a bad financial position, that they're just looking for the money right now and they need that. That's why they're trying to sell, because they're also not going to be a great partner for us. We need somebody that's boots on the ground, that's willing to run the practice and just isn't like, hey, let me take the money and run.
Mhm.
So you, the process sometimes is slow on purpose, because it's like I said, we're looking for love, we're dating,
Mhm.
so you're dating the other individual, so you're kind of feeling those things out. So yeah.
Yeah, that's again, this is just a fascinating world, right? And until if you've never, if it's your first time having to go through selling your practice, it can be very overwhelming, right? From a practice owner standpoint,
Yeah.
because there's so many different things that are happening, and but again, it comes down if you build a good business, then it's much
Yeah.
easier to sell, right?
So
But
what
it,
I enjoy, and I apologize for cutting you off, what I really enjoy is working with practice owners who are saying, I want to sell in a certain amount of years, because for those people, I can go to town and say, okay, this is what we need to create so we can get maximum value later. This is what we
Mhm.
need to do inside of the company right now. Not only will you profit more by doing what I'm telling you to do, you're going to get the highest more value. You're going to get more profit now, but you're also going to get more profit later, because you're going to be looked at as a practice and sought after, and people are going to be approaching you constantly. And believe me,
Yeah.
you want to be in those shoes.
Mhm.
What's a worse scenario? You decide not to sell and you still have a profitable company.
Yeah. Hey, you said something, and I was curious. This is kind of a little bit off topic, but I thought it was interesting. But your experience being with knowing different reimbursements in different states. I'm just curious, like, for what are some of the highest reimbursing states?
Some of the highest. Maine is a great state for reimbursement. Wyoming, believe it or not, some of the states that you would think that there's just less patient population,
Right.
they reimburse a little bit more because there's less patient population and clinics are more sparse. So the insurance companies will pay a lot more over there.
What would
But
you?
on the other side, they're not getting a lot of patients, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. What's sort of the average like in those high reimbursing states?
Uh, Less than 150, I would say, but sometimes between 120 and 150,
Wow, that's great.
per visit.
And then how about some of
Alaska's a high reimbursed state that's over 100.
yeah.
We didn't
And
have
how
any
about
in
some of the
Alaska, but
lowest
I just
ones?
know.
What about
Ooh,
the lowest
geez.
ones?
My own state of New Jersey was probably one of the lowest ones, in the $60, $70. Believe it or not, New York City or New York
Yeah.
area, the city area especially, the reimbursement is very low. Um,
Yeah, it just
yeah,
blows my mind.
Florida wasn't the greatest either, as you may know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were typically like,
Population dense areas, unfortunately, it's a situation where the insurance companies don't need you, but you need them.
right.
So they have so many practices. They're like, it's okay if you don't want to participate. We have you're a dime a dozen. Unfortunately, they look at you. That's where you don't have the clout. Um, I will say that for any of your listeners, if anybody's in New Jersey, I would tell them to reach out to me, because similar to what was happening with with me and I was able to negotiate higher rates on behalf of the private equity, we have formed a super group in New Jersey, which we use to bill with. And because of that, we're able to have much higher reimbursement than
Mhm.
anybody who's just walking in
That's
and getting
great.
it. So
I've seen some of that starting to happen in different states. I was just talking with someone the other day in Massachusetts that was kind of looking to make that kind of, group.
yeah,
You see it in I see it, my dentist started that right in our area here. I
yeah.
remember like some doctors that I knew like did that, and it just unfortunately that's kind of the environment we need that kind of
Yeah.
buying power against the insurance companies,
And
but I
and
think that's
that's what
great.
the supergroup's able to do. So yeah, if
Yeah.
anybody's in New Jersey, definitely they can reach out to me and I can
Yeah, and we'll
talk to
have
them about it. But
the
yeah,
contact information from it here on our website and everything
yeah.
too. So, getting back to the selling of your practice here, I'm just kind of curious, if you're a practice owner and you're happy now, but you know that, hey, in 5 or 10 years, I'm going to be looking to exit or, sell my practice. Like, what should they start with looking at themselves?
Um, are they the biggest provider in their practice? Are they seeing the most patients in their practice? Do they have systems put in place where they can monitor the practice by looking at some key statistics? You know, uh, if they chose to, basically is like we were saying, can they walk away from the practice for a couple weeks without having to worry about the practice, functioning? Do they have systems in place that they can just look at quickly to be able to know, hey, this practice is doing fine? If not, time to put some systems in, time to put some KPIs in, time to train staff. It's not just putting statistics in, it's changing behavior, it's changing, what people think that they're supposed to do. And, one big one, okay, one big one is, and you already know this, the percentage of arrival. You'll hire a front desk and they'll say, well, I can't help it if a patient canceled. I have no control over that. Whereas, I have hired really good front desk people that have been able to keep like over 95% arrival. Well, how are they able to do it? And another person that's not able to do it? It's because of, how they do what they do. We
Yeah,
train them on that. We can't meet the patient's goals if they're not coming in as prescribed at the end of the day.
yeah,
Putting in
absolutely.
systems to do that is not about just tedious, administrative exercise of monitoring statistics. It's actually you're improving your patient outcomes. You're improving your practice. Along
Yeah,
the way, you're making more money too.
yeah. And then how about if someone is, getting close there, maybe then, 1 to 2 years, is there anything different that they would have to, you know, do in that time frame?
I basically, well, I've always had statistics in my practice, but I really started fine tuning it in those 2 years coming up. I started cutting certain costs, saying, hey, you know what, a strategic buyer or a PE probably wouldn't have this on their line, so let me outsource this. So I
Mhm.
started outsourcing some things that I knew, you know. So it helped me from a personnel perspective. It helped me from, just managing the practice.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I mean, like you mentioned earlier, there's different types of buyouts, right? And there's different types of entities that, depending on what your aspirations and your own goals are, right?
Yeah,
And so if you're looking to let's say sometimes you're like, hey, you know what? I want to build a bigger business. It might make sense to partner with a larger group that you can get that movement forward, right? Or if you're looking to just, hey, I'm looking to transition out and do something totally
yep,
different, then that's a different way, right? So yeah, I remember that in my practice, like for me, the ideal scene was, my goal was to actually relocate, right?
yeah,
And start a whole nother way of business, right? I was going to do a marketing agency, right? So I needed to fully exit the practice. And so for me, the ideal scene was to partner with another PT clinic or private PT
yeah,
clinic, right? So I went through and I made a whole proposal, made it look really nice and everything. And I started to go out to other, search out the people that I wanted to connect with, and I think that's one thing too. Like you want to look for the companies that you would value to work with, right? Or value to transition your practice over to, because you put a lot
yeah.
of, love into your own business and you've got people that you really love working with, and you want to make sure that they're taken care of after you exit. So that was important to me to transition to someone that would be, the same kind of mindset. And
Yeah.
so I was able to, I went through a few different buyers for sure. You went through multiple times with the buying process there. And unfortunately for me, the story was that we started to sell our practice in 2008, right as things,
Oh,
went
housing. Yeah.
south. So that really stretched out our whole buying process, and we went through multiple buyers because there was the interest there, and they
Yeah.
really liked what we had, but the economy was definitely not where it was
When I
a
went
buyer's
through
market.
my whole process, if when I decided that I was going to go down that process, I entertained different things from different people, right? I looked at strategics, I looked at private equity, I looked at private equity that was brand new. Um, and in that process, I had started interviewing them a long time ago to find out how they evaluate things. When I figured out how they value it, then I just went to work for the next year and a half or 2 years to really just increase those things that bring value. But I also knew, the type of buyer that I wanted was not for me. It was not a strategic because I spent so many years developing my skill set as a CEO of the company. I didn't want to go and then just start treating again. Not that there was anything wrong with it. Like I had now found a new challenge, and that challenge was really enjoying to me to run the company. A
Mhm.
strategic just wanted me in the practice treating the patients all the time. Certain private equities too. But I found one private equity that wanted my leadership skills and wanted that. So that's what I really wanted. It
Mhm.
wasn't just who's going to pay me the most amount of money. It's like, what is my life going to look like afterwards, right?
Yeah.
If I have a couple $1 million in my pocket, but now I go to work every day hating it, I was like, that's not going to be worth it for me.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I think too, like you gotta, it's, one lesson learned for me was like you gotta plan sooner. The sooner you plan for your exit, the better. Like, because you have to,
Yeah,
like, I think what you did really well is like you researched what's out there and like how do things work with that, because there are different ways of doing it, and finding what would work for you in your future is key, and then being
yeah,
able to say, hey, you know what, that's what that I want to, I like that way that is that type of exit, and this is what they're ideally looking for. Let me start working now and build towards that so that I can have the maximum value and the
that's it.
maximum transition, right? So, but I think a lot of people just get to the point where they're like, hey, I'm ready to sell my business now. Let me start looking, right? Um,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
you've
that's
probably seen that a
exactly it.
lot. Yeah.
I see it a lot, yes. And I can't really fault them because they were trained as a physical therapist, not a business owner. They just kind of fell into business ownership thinking, I want a better lifestyle. I want this. I want to have control over X, Y, and Z. But I really like treating. So they continued to treat and focus all on treating. And they add another physical therapist. They don't know how to really teach them other than, hey, this is how you do the skills of a physical therapist. This is what we're known for. This is what I want you to do. But are they really watching them to see, what is their output, what is, how much am I paying them in comparison, how much are they producing, is that standard, am I overpaying them, just looking at these types of metrics, because at the end of the day, as an owner, you don't want to feel like you have to work hard just so you can employ people. That's not the goal. Then you feel like you're just working a job again.
Hmm. Yeah. And so, one of the areas as you that's going on quite heavily right now, obviously, is the buyout transition where the practice owner stays on, right? Um,
Yeah.
and move forward. And so in that role, like what's sort of typical out there as a buyout percentage, right? So, and like, does the practice owner typically keep some percentage of ownership in that practice, and what does that typically look like?
I've seen anywhere from 50-50 all the way down to like, 80-20. In some cases, they do 100%, if they really like the business and they don't really care for the owner per se. There's owners out there that have built, you know, very, very large entities, and they know that this entity is not dependent on the owner. And they just think that, hey, if we buy this over, the owner's just going to get in our way. They're going to constantly be in our way. But this thing has tremendous value to us. So let's just buy it, buy him out, and he's out the door.
Hmm.
He's not dependent on the business now. It's like they have, let's say, 100 clinics or 30 clinics or 50 clinics. They've kind of gotten past the point where it's the physician relationships are with the owner now, you
Hmm.
know, and they just feel like, hey, the way the owner runs the company is very different than what we want to be able to do, and he'll just going to get in the way, or she'll just get in the way. So let's just buy it over.
Gotcha. But that's probably not
That's not the
normal.
typical.
Yeah,
The
right.
typical would be either 70-30 or 80-20.
Okay. Good to
And then
know.
depending on how young the person is, they could be more aggressive and say, yeah, I want to hold the 30%. The private equity model is they will always take a larger percentage. They'll take
Hmm.
the majority of the percentage and give you the minority
Yep.
and they're going to pay you for it, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I do they have options there too? Like if you're, I guess if you're owning that percentage, do you get to maybe even roll that into the percentage of the total private equity company? Is there those kind of options that happen out there?
I guess it depends on how much they're willing to negotiate, how badly they need you. Majority of the time, they kind of put them into common shares. You'll get common shares that are basically the whole entity. It won't be a percentage. Like, let's say you're doing 70-30, they're paying you 70% and you're holding on 30%. You don't get 30% of the parent company. You get
Right,
30% of your entity, right? But then they'll give you some common shares that are for the whole entity as well,
Okay.
in a lot of
Gotcha.
cases.
Yeah.
And they kind of mix it up depending on how they do what they do. But yeah, that's kind of how it is. So they want you to still perform at your end. So that 30% is tied into how your business does. So if your business is tanking and the rest of the company is doing well, you're not going to do as well.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Yeah. And so I think, I mean, it's kind of a more commonplace thing that you see now. And so that's where I think what we were talking about earlier, where, you got to start thinking about it now and what that exit looks like for you and what's your
Yeah.
ideal scene for that. And then, I think the reality is that for a lot of practices, it's going to be this kind of step down approach where, just expect that through the sales process, you would stay on with your business for X number of time to
Yeah.
integrate with that company. And so that's going to help you again have the best transition possible, the maximum value in your practice. But if you're just say, hey, I'm going to be out, I think it's going to be harder to make that happen.
Yeah. If they're like, I want to retire tomorrow, I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
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 Which is really the wrong time to start thinking about selling your practice, right? Is at the
Yeah.
end of your rope. You don't want to be there, right? So, all right. And Amit, so we've had some amazing discussions here today. I love the knowledge that you've brought here and help us dive into this world of selling the practice and private equity and different groups and things like that. And so, to our listeners out there, is any final words of advice that they should think about as they go into thinking about starting to exit their business in the future?
Yeah. We've hit upon this point a couple times, but they need to start thinking now for what they want 5 years from now and
Mhm.
start kind of putting those things in place and really create the avatar of who the buyer is going to be and what would they like to see and think with that and then start building it that way.
Yeah. Sounds great.
It's
Awesome.
never actually too early to start, to be honest with you. You
I
could start
agree.
from the day that you open the practice and say, let me start putting systems in place. It's just going to help me run the practice better. So
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. And so, what's the best way for people to connect with you and find out more about what you do for clinics?
So my email is amit dot Gaglani, which is Gaglani at agmgmtinc.com. It's a mouthful, I know. Hopefully
Mhm.
they'll see it in the show notes. And then
Definitely.
they'll see my LinkedIn profile there as well. So they can contact me or connect with me there. I'd love to talk to anybody that's even thinking about this process, and I can kind of do a 30-minute call, just kind of tell them, what it would look like and, how we could work together and, basically all the things that I've learned and used in selling my practice twice. So
Mhm.
yeah, and actually what I've helped with other people too. My goal is really just to impart all the knowledge that I have learned over those 5 years of just, CEO training, to be able to give that to somebody else and say, look, this is what you want to do. If you haven't been trained as a CEO in your company, you want to execute and you want that kind of ideal life, at that certain point, let's work together to make it happen for you.
Mhm. Love it. Yeah. So definitely reach out to Amit there. You can find him on LinkedIn or his AG management consulting group. If you're looking for a guide or a consultant through either the sales process or just looking to level up your business, he's a great guy to connect with. So, Amit, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for listening to us. And I'm wishing you much success in your practice.
Thank you for listening to the Practice Marketing Podcast. Don't forget to get your free practice marketing sample kit at practicepromotions.net/kit. Start 2024 off the right way by building marketing systems that automatically attract new patients from online. That's practicepromotions.net/kit.